Hey, welcome to another episode of Dr. Amber's Know and Grow podcast. I hope you all are doing well. Hope everyone survived the eclipse, like literally and figuratively, astrologically. I hope that everybody's doing well. I know that was like a very intense time, and maybe in our next astrology episode, we'll talk a little bit more about it. But for today's episode, I actually have this topic that I want to talk about, and it is completely different from what I had planned to talk about today. Sometimes that happens to me where I'll have actually planned out a more structured episode, but then something happens to me, whether it's that morning or the evening before, and it completely shifts the tone of what I feel in the mood to talk about on this podcast. Sometimes I like really try to ground myself and say, Amber, look, you had a plan, what we doing, why you switching it up? But then there's also this part of me that's like, just go with whatever is coming to you, right? Like, I am in a season where I'm really trying to be more open to this intuitive side of me, this deeper connection that I have to other realms of life and aspects of life. And that means sometimes you just got to go with the flow. I have always struggled with going with the flow. And this morning, I really want to do that. Just kind of go with what I want to talk about this morning based on this experience I had. So, with that being said, let me share with you a story this morning. As you all know, I have two children. I was going to say toddlers, but my oldest will be 5 next month. And I just don't feel like that's a toddler anymore. I have to find the right word to refer to him because it used to be so easy to say, oh, I have two toddlers or I have a toddler and an infant. But, you know, as of next month, I will have a 5-year-old and I'll have a 3-year-old because my youngest will be 2. Oh, no, I'm sorry. My youngest will be 3. Actually, this week that you're listening to this podcast. And so I can't say I have two toddlers anymore. I think I don't know. What do you call that? I don't know. I got to look it up and figure it out. Either way, y'all know I have 2 kids, right? So with having 2 small children, there are so many moments where my children have an opinion about something or they decide they want to do something their own way that doesn't reflect the way or the manner with which me or my husband wants them to do something. And that happened this morning. And this happens all the time. So for those of you who have small children, you already know this is literally an everyday thing where they want to do something their way or they want to say no to something. And it's just like, okay, what do we do with this, right? So this morning, it was a very brief moment where my son needed to take his allergy medicine, and it's the spray, the nasal spray stuff, because he has pretty bad allergies, and so sometimes the pills like the Zyrtex and stuff just don't work. The nasal spray works really well for him, but of course he's a child and doesn't always want to do that. So there was this moment where he and my husband were like low key having this like moment. I'm trying to think of how to describe this moment. It wasn't a battle. I mean, it was more like, damn, what do you call it? And this is why I don't like to do these off the cuff episodes because I haven't had time to really reflect and think about it as much. But either way, this is fine. It was a power struggle. That's the word I was looking for. This power struggle about him taking this allergy medication. We eventually got him to take the medication. It took the both of us with some convincing and some reassuring, but also a little bit of, look, you about to take this medicine. You need it, okay? Um, and I literally had this moment while I was like helping support that. But then also, as he was walking away, huffing and puffing because he was pissed that he had to take his medicine, I had this thought that I feel like if this were to happen in the 90s or back in my day when I was a child, that would have escalated to some sort of physical punishment. that moment would have escalated to some sort of like physical punishment. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like, and so then the idea or the thought of corporal punishment came to my mind because I literally just I had a flash of 30 years ago, if that were my sibling or one of my cousins or just anyone that was maybe 5 or 6 30 years ago, I think the parenting response would have been so different. I don't know about you, but I often find myself thinking about the ways that parenting has shifted over the course of the past 3 to 4 decades. I think about it a lot. And I think it's because I'm a parent, I'm a psychologist, and I get to like have this one foot in, one foot out of like, this is what parents today are trying to do in their parenting. This is what I'm trying to do as a parent. This is what I um, coach and support and teach as a psychologist with regard to parenting. But then there's also this like memory of what parenting used to be from my perspective as a child. And it is so fascinating to me how things have really shifted. I think about this a lot. I really do. And I think that's why I was like, I really want to talk about this on the podcast because there are so many moments in my life today as a parent where my child will do something and I'll literally have this thought of, ooh, if that was me when I was your age, or if that was my sibling when he was your age, it would have gone so much worse and differently. So I did take a few notes in the 4 or 5 minutes that I decided to record this episode. And what I wrote was the shift away from corporal punishment. And just thinking about that. And I don't know about you, but that shift to me has been so fascinating because I literally think about all the amazing work that we as parents today have done to shift away from this approach to parenting that used to be so normalized and so prevalent, so accepted. And all the while, as I'm talking about this, I am trying to balance having empathy and compassion for our parents who maybe did utilize corporal punishment because I do think that there is something to say about parenting in a generation where this is just what we do. This is what we know. This is what we truly believe is the best thing for our children, right? But then there's also these other factors that we'll get into later of like control, but then also safety, and that being also wrapped up in fear. How many of our parents utilized corporal punishment because deep down inside they were fearful that, well, if I don't make sure my kids act right now, what will happen to them later if they don't, right? So there's a lot of fear of like harm and danger and safety that was embedded in this belief that corporal punishment is the best way to parent our kids because we ultimately want to keep them safe. It takes a lot of digging deep to have that perspective because I also know, and this is valid too, I also know that a lot of people are just completely zero tolerance for anything that may harm a child. Zero tolerance for any corporal punishment, any physical punishment. And so just the thought of like, let's have compassion or empathy for our parents or our grandparents who did utilize that can be hard for some people because they're like, no, because that harmed me. that harmed my sibling, that harmed children. Yes. And also, I think it really is important for us to really think deeply and really conceptualize, like, well, why were our parents and our grandparents doing it? Like, so I just think about that a lot. So I'm looking at my notes here. I do want to let you know that I have a chapter in my new book, A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation, about this topic, about the ways that parenting has shifted over the generations. And in chapter 2 of the book, I talk about 3 parenting approaches that were prevalent back in the 80s and the 90s. And then I talk about 3 that are prevalent now in the 2000s. I don't know what we call this now, the 10s and the 20s. I don't know. And just really thinking about the differences in these approaches and how we saw the shift, but then also applying these concepts of like dysregulation and self-regulation. And one could also make the argument that if one is utilizing an approach that does rely on a lot of physical punishment or a lot of corporal punishment or a lot of really harsh discipline, is dysregulation playing a factor, right? Is that parent actually grounded in the moment, emotionally present, or are they extremely dysregulated to the point where they have reached their max and this is the only tool I have, right? I don't know. But in the chapter we talk about that. And so highly encourage you pre-order your book. Book will be released June 18th. Then we can chat about it more once you read chapter 2. Either way, I do believe that this current generation has this very big vested interest in ways to parent that do not include physical punishment. I think we're in this weird place where we see how engaged we are in learning these new approaches and learning about mental health, learning about the emotional well-being of our children, wanting to actually understand what they're thinking and how they're feeling, wanting to communicate, wanting to connect, understanding that connection is power. But then also remembering, when times were vastly different. So we are so invested because I think part of us wishes that we had what we are doing now with our kids, but then also we are so excited to see who our kids become now that things have changed. Sometimes I imagine that, like, and this is kind of funny. I kind of joke about this sometimes. Like, my kids don't know why someone would be afraid to of a belt, right? Like, or a switch. They don't even know what a switch is. They'll just be like, "Oh, this is a stick from a tree." Like, the children have no fear of any of that. They don't know what any of that stuff means. And so, like, what is it going to be like to raise kids who literally don't know any of that stuff that, me or my husband or my friends, we know that belts had multiple purposes. We knew that. We knew what a switch was, and it wasn't just a branch off the tree. But my kids have no idea. Like, that's not even a concept in their brain that physical punishment might be something that their parents utilize. And so I just often think, we are a generation of parents who are raising children who have this very different perspective that have no idea, have no idea. And what is that going to be like for them? What does that open up for them, emotionally, or what doors, what opportunities will come to them relationally or in their ability to even understand themselves? Who will they be because of this? When thinking about this topic, I also was thinking about how in order to parent differently, there needs to be a shift in priorities or values with regard to parenting, right? I I also think That is why our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation, it was so prevalent and so normalized because I just generally think the values and the priorities in parenting were different, right? And I believe that there were probably even subtle shifts in how maybe my grandparents parented versus how my parents parented. There's these subtle shifts that continue to evolve. And the same for when our kids become adults. There's going to be a shift in priorities, a shift in values with regard to parenthood that'll make how I'm parenting today look very different than how my kids will parent 30 years from now. So these are some of the things that came to mind to me when I really thought like, well, what are the priorities that have shifted or what are the values that have shifted? One, I believe that there used to be a very big emphasis on control in parenting. You need to be able to control your kid. You know that old saying, "Oh, they don't got home training. Oh, she don't know how to the like I'm not saying anything, but y'all already know." Parents, especially mothers, used to receive so much shame and judgment for not being able to control, and I'm using quotes here, control their kids in public. And I also think that even still today there's a little bit of that still in the undercurrent of when you see children or a family or a mother out and maybe the kids are not behaving as well as they could. There's a little tinge of like what is she doing or what's going on or she needs to be doing something different, right? But I also would argue that that might still be within us and that's something that we need to unlearn. That's something we need to unlearn because, you know, we grew up in that generation of parents, especially mothers, are judged when their kids are out of control or not doing what she thinks, what she's saying. Like, that's crazy to me. But now the priority has shifted to our kids having and experiencing more freedom and more expression, right? So now I'm a millennial, I'm parenting, and there's a big emphasis on children should feel free. They don't need to be controlled. They're their own person. They have autonomy, right? Like, let them express themselves. When I say things like that to my mother and to my father when he was living, they used to look at me like, that's different. But the one thing I do appreciate about my mom is that she realizes like, ooh, that's very different than how I used to parent, but I like it. You know, she's always like, I really like how you actually stop to listen to the kids. I remember her saying one time, she was like, she was watching me parent. She was like, I never used to ask you why you wanted to do something. I never really thought to even ask you about your opinion about something. I just told you what to do or I just gave you the clothes to wear. But I like how you always ask the kids what their opinion is. And so I appreciate that my mom sees the differences and she is embracing them and invalidating me, for doing something different. So again, from control to freedom and expression, that is a cultural shift, a generational shift that we have seen that ultimately leads to us parenting in a different way. If your value or if your priority is allowing your children to experience freedom and expression, you probably will not be utilizing corporal punishment. However, if your value and your priority in parenting is to control your children, you probably not really fucking with gentle parenting. That's just the truth. Okay, another priority value shift I've noticed is respect. Back in the day, they were very big on you respect me. And so often that manifested itself in respect means not talking back. Respect means not giving your opinion if you're a child. Respect means adults have the last word. There was a huge emphasis on respecting adults, respecting authority figures. But now I believe what we're seeing is this bigger emphasis on deeper understanding. So, what I mean by that is, so for example, we all know the example of talking back, right? Back in the day, if a child were to say how they feel, that was interpreted as talking back and that was disrespectful. But now, you know, when my children tell me how they feel about maybe a consequence that I've given, or, something I've said that they don't like, I don't interpret that as disrespect. And instead, I hear it as, oh, there's something they're trying to communicate to me about how they feel in this moment. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to go back on the consequence, right? Like if I said no chocolate, right? And my kids are like, rah, 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 about it. Okay, cool. Like, tell me how you feel. Tell me you're upset. Tell me you're angry. Tell me you don't think it's fair. Tell me you think I'm mean. None of that to me is disrespectful. It is you communicating yourself, and I actually want to know how you feel. You still not going to have the chocolate. But I want to know how you feel. And again, I think that's a shift, because if your priority and your value in parenting is having your child respect you as an adult or as the parent, that might feel threatening. Having your child communicate their angry feelings to you, or having your child communicate their discontentment with you, that can feel really threatening. And so that probably would not be allowed. However, if your priority and your value is deeper understanding of your child, you probably will be less likely to completely cut off their expression of communication, because you want to know how they feel. And so again, I think that a lot of these changes in our parenting approaches that we've seen over the generations, really what's at the core is this shift in priority and value. Another one, we kind of talked about this, but compliance versus autonomy. I think that's similar to the other two, but I think back in the day, and again, when I'm saying back in the day, I'm thinking like the 80s and the 90s, compliance was huge. It was very much, you do what I say. You do what I say. We don't ask me no questions about it. You all, don't you love how easy you could slip into that type of parent? It's like we've been trained to be like do what I say and don't ask me no questions. It slips out so easy because that's how we were brought up. The emphasis there is compliance. Comply with my direction, comply with my instruction, and I don't want to hear what you have to say about it, because that is not as important. What's important is that you are complying with my request. That was the emphasis back then. But now, I think as parents today, there's a bigger emphasis on autonomy. And so for us, what that might look like is offering alternatives, hearing opinions, right? Like, so for instance, and this is kind of what my mom was speaking to. She was like, I used to just give you the pants to put on or give you the socks, and I didn't really think about whether you wanted to wear them, right? It was kind of like, you're just going to put these on, and there's not really a question about it. You're just going to do this. Versus my daughter, y'all, I literally can't just give her the clothes, because she has an opinion about it. She's 2, and she knows what she wants and what she doesn't want. And so if my value and priority in parenting was compliance, that would feel threatening to me. Like if I told you to wear the red pants and you're telling me you don't want to, that's not okay. So you're going to wear the red pants, because my value and priority in parenting is compliance. You're gonna do what I've asked. Versus, my priority in parenting being autonomy. So what does that look like? I asked her what she want to wear. I'm like, okay, Eden, we need pants and we need a shirt. Or do you want to wear a dress? You want to wear pants? Okay, which pants you want to wear? You want to wear the blue? You want to wear the purple? You want to wear the pink? You tell me, because my priority and my value as a parent today is giving her the autonomy to choose what she wants, with some guidance. Of course, I'm still her parent, and so I'll guide. I'll let her know, like, hey, those maybe are too big, or oh, those probably won't be well for the weather, and help to guide her to see what the other options are. But I want her to feel free and autonomous and be able to choose what she actually likes. Right? Last one, safety. Let's talk about this value of safety. I think this one is a very touchy one because it's very personal. And I think this is the one that, if any of all of them, gives us the most compassion for how our parents and our grandparents parented. I think in the 80s and the 90s, definitely like 50s, 60s, 70s, there was a lot more concern for the safety of Black children specifically when it came to misbehavior. There was this belief, a very valid belief, that if my child acts up in the world, if my child misbehaves outside of home, they could be severely hurt. They could be killed. They could be threatened, and I don't want that. And so I need to make sure that my child stays safe when they're not with me. I need to do whatever I can do to make sure that my child knows how to be respectful, how to comply, how to respect, how to do, because I want to keep them safe. I'm pausing because I don't think that this is no longer a concern, but I think that something has shifted in that now our generation is also so well aware of the mental and the emotional damage that can cause. I also do think that we today have the luxury of benefiting from a lot of societal changes and, a lot of cultural shifts that keep us safer than if we were in the 50s and 60s and 70s. But I just don't think we can be judgmental of that. Parents who desperately want to keep their kids safe, and to them that meant severe punishments, that meant control, that meant priorities of respect and compliance, because for them it ensured that my child will come home, right? I'm glad that things have shifted. I'm glad that we as a generation have been opened up to these other ways of parenting and other ways of keeping our child safe. I think I'm so grateful to live in a time where mental health, emotional well-being is so valued and prioritized, because that's really the at the core of a lot of our parenting today. Yes, I want my child to be physically safe, but I also want them to be emotionally well. I also want their mental health to be stable and healthy and optimal. And so what are the things that I need to do and also discontinue doing to ensure that my child is emotionally and mentally well? I really appreciate the shifts in the generations, for sure. I don't know about you, but I really do appreciate that. So now I want to speak to the parent who there okay, a few things. I want to speak to the parent who maybe is still struggling with not utilizing corporal punishment more severe punishments. I want to speak to the parent who still often wants to discipline in a way that maybe feels harsh or feels really critical. I also want to speak to the parent who maybe started their parenting journey utilizing those approaches and now are in the midst of trying to switch. I want to talk to you because I think that society often shames you, judges you for mistakes that you've made and for things that you've done, decisions that you've made. And I know how bad you want to shift this. I know that you are starting to see things differently and your perspective is changing and the values in your parenting have shifted, and this probably really resonated with you today because you're like, yeah, I did used to think like that, but now I want to think this other way. But you're finding it difficult because you likely grew up with those old principles and with those old mindsets. All of us did. Well, I won't say all of us, but many of us did. Many of us, even those of us who started your parenting journey in the quote unquote right way, right? You still have been impacted by the way that you were parented. And so I have a few tips for how to continue to shift your parenting approach if you're finding that sometimes there are still those older ways prevalent for you. How do you shift to something that feels more healthy, that feels more conducive to some of the newer values we talked about: freedom and expression, deeper understanding, autonomy, mental and emotional well-being? If these are values you want to embrace in your parenting, these are 5 things I want you to do to start shifting. 1, I want you to reframe and reassess your values in parenting. So essentially what we did today, I want you to really just take some time to think about, okay, as a parent, what are my values? Like, what are my priorities as a parent? What is really important to me when I think about raising my child? Is it freedom or is it control? Is it respect or is it deeper understanding? Is it compliance? Is it autonomy? And you don't have to only stick with these words. Take a moment to really think about what are your true values when you think about raising your child, connecting with your child, helping your child become an adult, being a parent. What do you value? I think we all need to take a moment to reassess those values. And once you do that, get 5 of the top values and look at them and think to yourself, is this what I want? If so, let's proceed. And if not, think about whether you need to reevaluate some of those. Because maybe for you, if you thought about this, respect and control did still come up. But really think, why do I feel that I want respect or control to be a value for me in parenting? And just sit with it. Reevaluate, reassess those values so you can really align yourself and ground yourself in what do I value? What do I actually care about as a parent? Number 2, I want you to repair if needed. And so this is really for the parent who maybe you started your parenting journey with your child and you were using corporal punishment or you were using some physical punishment, some really harsher disciplines, and now you're trying to shift, right? There may still be some guilt for you because you're like, I used to do those things to my child and now I don't want to do that anymore. I want to do something different. Repair. The repair is so important. I've talked about repair in a lot of episodes in this podcast. And so that repair looks like apology. It looks like explanation for how things can be different. And it then looks like changed behavior. So really think about, how do I apologize to my child and acknowledge the wrongdoings? How can I explain that I want to do things differently and what I'm trying to do now as a parent, but then also what does changed behavior look like for me? Number 3, I want you to open yourself to learning new strategies, right? Because the process is not just no longer doing the things that don't work, but the process is also, if I'm not going to do that, what am I going to do? You have to learn. You have to open up yourself to all these new ways of parenting and these ways of being. And there's so many ways to learn. You know, that's the thing about parenting. The learning doesn't stop. And when you become a parent, you might find that, oh shit, I got to learn a lot more because there's so much I don't know. And that is okay. So get a good book about parenting. I know one and I'll suggest it soon. get a good book to help you learn the new ways of parenting, or seek mentorship from parents that you look up to or that you find inspiring or encouraging, or talk to your friends about this because your friends are probably going through a very similar process. Utilize YouTube, utilize the internet. There's so many resources out there about how to parent in certain ways, whether it's gentle parenting, conscious parenting, positive parenting, or just a mix of whatever you want to do, as long as it's grounded in the values that are healthy and optimal for your children. Go with it, but open yourself up to learning. Number 4, I really want you to have compassion for the part of you that still needs to unlearn. Okay. And so this is what's going to happen. Your child's going to do something one day, and it's going to trigger in you all these ways that you want to teach them a lesson, right? Like, oh, you're not going to do this to me. So that's what this is. Stop, take a breath, and realize that you are in a process of unlearning, and unlearning is a process. Okay. And so it will take, these double takes you have to do, right? Like your child might say something, then your first instinct might be, oh, but then you got to be like, oh, well, ooh, bring it back. Because guess what? We're doing things different now. We're doing things different. So you may not be going with your first instincts anymore. You got to go with the second instinct, because your first instinct is going to be like, well, go get the belt. But your second instinct, the one that you're going to follow, is going to be like, oh, no, we don't do that no more. So we're not going to go. We're not doing anything physical, no corporal punishment. And instead, we're going to communicate. We're going to connect. We're going to repair, right? So have compassion for that part of you that still sometimes has a tendency to do the old things. Have compassion for that part of you that is still unlearning those old ways, because it is a process. The last thing I want you to do is order A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation. That is the book that I think would be most helpful for you in this process. And it is my new book, all about how to self-regulate as a parent. And I think for the parents who really resonated with this episode today, you might also find that your capacity, your emotional dysregulation, your overwhelm, your overstimulation, your big feelings often are a driver for how you are parenting. We are different when we are overwhelmed and overstimulated versus when we are well rested and relaxed, right? Like as a parent, you're able to approach situations differently based on how you feel. And so I want to give you the tools and the strategies to really learn, well, shit, how do I actually feel? Am I feeling triggered in this moment? Do I actually feel grounded? Am I okay? And if I'm not, how do I make sure that I'm grounded and I'm regulated and I'm in a point where I actually can parent effectively? I think you may need that because, again, this is an unlearning process, and this process is going to need you to learn new tools and also to learn deeper things about yourself. And that's what I love most about this book. It's like, yes, there's tips and there's strategies, but it's also a process and an opportunity for you to deepen your connection with yourself so that you can be the parent you want to be. So I hope that this was helpful for you all today. I thoroughly enjoyed this episode, and I'm so glad that the events of this morning shifted me in this direction, because I think it ended up being a really good conversation. So if you benefited from this episode, I want you to do a few things. Share it with another friend who you think would also benefit from it. I also want to stay connected with you. So go follow me on Instagram, or if you're a YouTube fan, go subscribe to my YouTube channel at Dr. Amber Thornton. I also want to make sure that you all order your copies of the book, A Parent's Guide to Self-Regulation. You can pre-order your copy today, and then you'll get your copy on June 18th, right when it's released, and we all can start reading it together. I'm so excited for you to get your hands on this book. It has been such an amazing process bringing it to life for you, and I can't wait for people to start utilizing the strategies and deepening their connections with themselves so that they can really become the parents they want to be. Okay, we will talk soon, you all. Have a wonderful week.